everybody, Mark aka the Nerdy Punk back again today for a new video. Hope you guys are doing well. It is March 1st of 2024, so we are officially 2 full months into the year, which is nuts. But today I'm going to be recapping my February watch list, my Letterboxd entries for the month of February 2024, and I was able to watch 13 movies this month, so a pretty solid amount for me, especially during the school year when I'm working every day. So I would say, it was a pretty good number. I'm pretty happy with it, so I'm starting to pick up the pace a little bit in 2024. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into this list. We are, just to keep you guys informed, we are basically 1 week away from the Oscars, Sunday, March 10th, so we're 9 days away. Definitely stay tuned for Oscar week. I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. So I watched 13 movies. They're not entirely movies. There's one TV series on this list because Letterboxd added the option to enter TV series this year, as well as one comedy special that I want to talk about. So let's get started. Movie number 1 is Dream Scenario, starring Nicolas Cage, directed by Christopher Borgli. This movie was released by A24 last year. Didn't get a chance to see it in the theaters, but I really wanted to see it. Pretty big Nick Cage fan, and this movie looked really intriguing. It had a really cool premise. Basically, Nicolas Cage plays this boring professor from the Northeast, and all of a sudden he goes from being a nobody to appearing in everybody's dreams, and it explores this idea of collective dreaming in a pretty cool way. And it's a funny movie. It's got a decent amount of action in it, surprisingly, and I thought it explored some really interesting ideas. There's a little bit of social commentary and satire in there as well. Nick Cage delivers a fantastic performance, and I think, in my opinion, an Oscar-worthy performance, but of course he wasn't even close to a nomination for this movie, which is kind of a travesty. So I really like the movie. It's not without its flaws, but you will definitely be hearing more about it in the next week or so when I get to my top movies of the year. I'm going to give Dream Scenario a 4 out of 5. Next movie that I watched was Rustin, which stars Coleman Domingo, and he was nominated for Best Actor for this movie, so I wanted to watch it so I could see his performance. And I was really thrilled with his performance. I wasn't really thrilled with the film as a whole. I thought the film was kind of boring, predictable. It felt like a film that I've seen many times before, and there's so much great material, I think, to work with here. It explores the life of Bayard Rustin, who was one of the leaders in the civil rights movement, and he was especially a driving force behind the March on Washington, which is where Dr. King famously gave his I Have a Dream speech. One of the just most amazing events in American history, especially in the past 100 years. And Bayard Rustin was such a fascinating and important figure, and I just feel like they could have done way more with this. Coleman Domingo was amazing, and I think he's definitely deserving of that nomination. I have no problems with that necessarily, but I just wasn't a big fan of the film as a whole, so I gave Rustin a 3 out of 5. Next film, kind of continuing with an almost Black History Month theme, I guess. In February, I watched I Am Not Your Negro, and this was a rewatch. This is a film about the life of James Baldwin, another incredible, important figure in American history, and in my opinion, one of the most fascinating figures to study. James Baldwin was a gay black man who lived in New York, grew up in New York in the 50s, 60s, and then in the 60s he moved from New York to Paris and went on to write some incredible books. If you don't know much about James Baldwin, which American history classes, at least in my part of the country, don't do a great job of teaching him, you definitely should look into his life because he's a fascinating person, and this movie would be a great place to start. Basically what it does is it takes an unfinished book that James Baldwin was writing when he passed away in the 1980s, and it explores his interactions with Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and third guy that I'm completely blanking on right now, Medgar Evers, yes. Those three guys, and it talks about those three and their impact on the civil rights movement and Black America, and I think It is so well done. It's the voice of James Baldwin in the film is portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson, so he's narrating throughout pretty much the whole film, and it just touches on not just James Baldwin and those three men, but the civil rights movement as a whole. And I think it's a phenomenally well done documentary. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Next watch of the month, this is the comedy special that I was talking about. One of my favorite comedy specials in recent years, and this is The Great Depression by Gary Gulman. Gary Gulman is one of my favorite comedians. Ever since I discovered him first, I think he was on Conan, and I was a big Conan fan, and he has just so many amazing bits and material. He has a fantastic video you can find on YouTube where he tells a lot of jokes about how the states got their abbreviations. Sounds kind of boring on paper, but he makes it so funny. You definitely should go watch that clip, and then if you like it, definitely get into Gary Gulman's work. But this special came out in 2019, I want to say. This was a rewatch for me. I've already seen this special before, but this special came out right after he had a major depressive episode, and he had to go to the hospital and all kinds of stuff, and he tells that story in this special, and it's such a real, honest special. It's raw in every sense of the word, but it's still really funny. Like, you get those serious moments, but it's still hilarious at the same time, and it is one of the best comedy specials in recent years, for sure, maybe of all time. I love it that much. Definitely recommend it, especially if you suffer with depression, which I've had my own issues with. I think it's incredibly relatable. It's just so real and honest. You will appreciate it, and you will probably get some catharsis, which is what I experienced watching this special. It really kind of boosted my mood a little bit. It kind of helps you empathize and realize that you're not alone, that other people deal with these kinds of things as well. And it's so good. I don't give comedy specials grades because I feel like comedy is so subjective. Film as a whole is subjective, but comedy is even more so. I don't feel appropriate to give grades to comedy specials. If I did, this would be a 5 out of 5. But I just put it in Letterboxd as a like, and I love this special. Next one is the TV series that I watched. I actually finished this up, started it in January. I finished the new Ted series on Peacock. This was so much fun. For context, I'm a pretty big Seth MacFarlane fan. I've enjoyed Family Guy since my childhood. American Dad, of course, the Ted movies I've really liked. And he made this other live-action movie called A Million Ways to Die in the West that I really like as well, even though a lot of people think it's garbage. I really like Seth MacFarlane. I'm kind of a bit of a fanboy. But that being said, in the past few years, a lot of his work has kind of gotten a little mediocre, in my opinion. I don't really care for Family Guy anymore. I'm not even sure how much direct involvement he has in the series. But this Ted series he created, and I think he wrote all the episodes, and this is peak, prime Seth MacFarlane. For the first time in a long time, it really reminded me of prime Family Guy, back in like the 2000s, right when it came back from the grave, when it was resurrected thanks to Adult Swim and DVD sales. It was just at the top of its game, and with Ted, right, this series, Seth MacFarlane is back at the top of his game. I loved this. It was so good. Hilarious. I was a little iffy on it when it was first announced because it was like, it's this prequel series. Mark Wahlberg has nothing to do with it, which I'm fine. I'm not a big Mark Wahlberg fan in the first place. But it was pretty unknown actors in this movie, or in this series. And I was a little iffy on this, if this is going to be really bad or good, and it is really good. The jokes are hilarious. They introduce some really great characters. It has a lot of heart to it. Georgia Wiggum, I want to give a shout out to her character Blair in the series. I keep wanting to call it a movie. Oh man, she is gorgeous, and her character is just such an amazing person. I literally developed a relatively strong celebrity crush there. It is such an incredible series. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't given it a chance yet. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Incredibly solid series, one of the best things you can find on streaming at the moment. Next thing up here, this is kind of like the Valentine's Day time of the month, so wanted to watch somewhat of a rom-com. This is kind of an anti-rom-com. It's The Lobster by Yorgos Lanthimos. Been on a bit of a Yorgos Lanthimos kick again with, of course, Poor Things from last month that I watched, and I loved the movie, so it kind of got me thinking about The Lobster, which is one of my favorites of his films. It's so funny. It's out there, it's weird, it's bizarre. It really just kind of takes a hatchet to societal relationship roles and the societal expectations that you have that put so much pressure on people. And it's, for those who've not seen the film, the premise is that Colin Farrell plays a character who's newly single, and he lives in a near future dystopia where if you're single, to society, that's the worst thing that could happen. So you're sent to this hotel where you have approximately, I think, 30 days to find a new match. And if you don't form another couple, then they turn you into an animal. So Colin Farrell's character wants to be turned into a lobster, hence the title of the film. But it really just kind of goes after society, and it's a great satire. It's absurd, it's funny, it's well acted. The dialogue is very dry and very witty, but if you like it, you really are gonna like this. So I think it's a near perfect film, 4.5 out of 5. Next up was, I believe, the only trip to the theater of the month, and that was to see Anatomy of a Fall. Fantastic film. I did a full movie review for this movie. So if you want to check out my in-depth thoughts on the film, definitely go find that video on the channel. It's one of the more recent uploads. I really liked the movie. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Really solid. Happy that it's getting some Oscar love. I think it's well deserved. Excited for Justine Triet getting that directing nomination. I definitely think, there was a lot of buzz, a lot of, kind of people upset that Greta Gerwig didn't get nominated. I think Justine Triet was more deserving, even though I liked what Greta Gerwig did with Barbie. This was on another level. So one of the best courtroom dramas in a long time. Next up, this was kind of my Valentine's Day watch. Probably my favorite cheesy rom-com, and that's She's Out of My League, which I believe is from 2010, stars Jay Baruchel and Alice Eve. And, as a dude, you could probably understand why I liked this movie. Growing up, I always had a lot of self-esteem issues, still do. So Jay Baruchel being like the average dude, having a gorgeous woman like Alice Eve fall in love with him, besides that, the movie does have some heart to it. It's hilarious. I really think it's super underrated when it comes to early 2010s movies and especially rom-coms. Next up, I watched Maestro, another one checked off the list of the Best Picture nominations. I am almost there. So Maestro is definitely my least favorite of the Best Picture nominations, and that's not going to surprise many people. Most people are ranking Maestro near the bottom or at the bottom. It's not even really a love-hate movie. Like, some people liked it a lot. I haven't really heard anybody who just thinks Maestro is the best movie of the year. It's pretty underwhelming, in my opinion. I thought the makeup was great. I thought Bradley Cooper was really good. Really kind of disappeared into that role. But that being said, I just found the rest of the movie to be pretty lackluster and somewhat boring. I had to finish this movie over 2 viewing experiences. Like, I stopped the movie a little bit halfway through, and then I didn't get back to it for a few days, which kind of gives you an idea that I kind of was bored by the film. So I definitely at the bottom, but it's still a decent movie. I wouldn't say it's bad by any means, but it's understandable why it would be one of the last ones I get to in the Best Picture race. Next movie that I watched, Angus from 1995. A classic cult movie, teen comedy, drama-ish, deals with a kind of similar things with She's Out of My League. You've got an overweight teenager, I believe he's 14 in the film, and he's obsessed with this girl, of course, and basically the whole movie is him trying to win over this girl. But it really doesn't just follow the relationship. It follows a lot of personal growth among the main character, which I really liked. It's, again, a movie with a ton of heart. It's a movie that, you know, I could see if I watched this as a teenager when I was the same age as the character in the film, I could see this being one of my favorites of all time, because it just really forms that deep emotional connection and impact. But probably the best thing about this movie, in my opinion, other than the message of it, is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is so good. If I was alive in 1995, I would have been going bonkers over this soundtrack. It's got deep cuts from Green Day, the Muffs, Smoking Popes, all kinds of great pop punk bands. It's got a Weezer deep cut from the Pinkerton album before Pinkerton even came out. Like, I would have been going nuts for this. I still love the soundtrack. I've been listening to it on repeat since I watched the movie. I gave Angus a 3.5 out of 5. All right, we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. 3 movies left. My friends and I did a double feature a couple nights ago with the Scooby-Doo live action films from the early 2000s. So Scooby-Doo from 2002 and then Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, both written by James Gunn. And I'm a really big fan of James Gunn's writing, especially when it comes to comedy. I think he does really well. And these movies are definitely dated, but I love them. They're nostalgia out the wazoo for me, especially the first one where they go to Spooky Island. I love that movie. I mean, they are perfectly cast in the roles. Matthew Lillard, Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, perfect cast. And like I said, so much nostalgia. The first movie I watched so many times. The second one I actually haven't watched in a long time until I just most recently rewatched it. And I forgot a lot of the movie, and I was really pleasantly surprised. One of my friends is literally obsessed with this movie, like he's seen it over 100 times. And so he was quoting the movie to us, and that's what really inspired this double feature. But I had forgotten how funny the second one was. Like, I thought it was going to be garbage. I thought the first one was going to be somewhat redeemable because of my nostalgia. The second one is so funny. I think it's funnier than the first movie. It's definitely not quality, but it's just a whole lot of fun. And sometimes that's all you really need from a film. Sometimes you don't need like this really highbrow stuff. Sometimes you just need kind of like cinematic junk food, which is what the 2 Scooby-Doo films are for me. And then the final movie that I watched of February 2024 was American Fiction, another Best Picture nominee crossed off the list. This stars Jeffrey Wright, directed by Cord Jefferson, and it's a really fun satire with some heartfelt moments as well. I feel like when the film focused on the satire and it really wasn't pulling punches, I thought it was really good. I really liked the satire elements of this film. I love Jeffrey Wright's performance. I thought the screenplay was pretty good. Whenever it went towards the more family drama aspect, I thought it kind of lost me a little bit. There's some elements of that part of the story that I liked, but many elements that I didn't, and I found somewhat underwhelming. So overall, American Fiction is a little bit of a mixed bag. It's definitely in the bottom tier of the Best Picture nominees this year, but I'm not heartbroken that it got a nomination. I think it's definitely a solid film. It has a lot to say, and I really enjoyed it overall. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. All right, that's gonna wrap up my February Letterboxd recap for 2024. Real quick, a little update on content. So like I said, Oscar week is coming up. I'm gonna be recording my top 10 movies of the year. That list is just about final. One more movie to watch. You guys can probably guess what it is if you've been following me on the channel. So yeah, one more movie to watch, and then I will be officially ready to do the top 10 movies. That will be coming out at some point early in the week, like Monday, Tuesday-ish, probably leaning more towards Tuesday. And then I've got a whole slate of videos for Oscar week. So you're gonna see my Oscar predictions. You're gonna see my award show. I've already, got the graphics going for that one. Excited to bring that back. I did that a couple years ago where I created basically my own award show and took the Oscar categories, but gave you my picks, what I would have chosen to be nominees, and then of course to win. So I'm excited to do that. Kind of playing around with an idea of doing like a ranked video on the Best Picture nominees, since I finally have watched or will have watched all 10. So I'm kind of thinking about that, ranking them in terms of my preference, all kinds of stuff. And then of course I'd like to do a reaction once we get to Sunday night, the Oscars. Nothing live, obviously, but I'd like to give you my thoughts on who wins and all of that excitement. So it's Oscar time, baby. I'm really excited for this. Definitely hope you guys have an incredible weekend, and stay tuned for the next week on the channel. It should be exciting. See you guys later.